Well, my life before the MBA was far more glamorous, to say the least.
Thank you so much, Anindita, for today joining with us. So, Anindita, please tell me about yourself a little bit.
I basically have about 8 years working cross-functionally across different like business, creative, and technology within entertainment. So most of my experience has been within the film industry for 7 years in Bollywood, as you call it. And now for the last year, I've been working in Hollywood. But that's more from a client perspective now, because I am now, after my MBA, I'm working with Tata Consulting Services. So I do more of tech consulting and a lot of business strategy. And the great part is that I still get to stick to my entertainment and media clients.
Yeah.
So yes, for the last year, I've been working in Los Angeles a lot, even though I stay in New York City. So yes, it's been fantastic.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Can you tell me a little bit about like how you got into TCS? Like how did you apply? Like what was the interview process look like? Did you have a referral? Like, can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So with my interview process and application process to Tata Consulting Services, it was fairly stereotypical, where it was from a campus recruiting format. That they had come, like a lot of the other companies that came to a school, they basically had a lot of company sessions, coffee chats, and interviews and everything all on campus. So I was recruited from the campus itself. So I did not have referrals in TCS at all. But during my internship, my first year, I had actually interviewed with them for an internship.
Oh, okay.
And I, at the time, didn't realize tech consulting was something that I was looking at. So it was, a more casual interview. So it worked out that it was more of a coffee chat with them, that I created a connection with them. In the first year, like I didn't really stay in touch, but I had a good conversation with them where I guess there was mutual respect and curiosity. I think there was a career fair which happened again, and I happened to meet the same kind of recruiters in one of those, those quick coffee sessions that we keep on having. And I spoke to them about what I did in the summer. And in the summer, I was working as an intern with Delta Airlines, where I was working on the commercial strategy and product marketing, focusing on onboard customer experience. So that's when they were like, hey, we're looking for someone in the CXT space because, we're trying to do a lot of work there. And you have this entertainment and media background. Perhaps, let's have a conversation. Yeah. So that's where it restarted again. And then it was more the regular route.
Can you tell me a little bit about your day-to-day and like what you do at TCS?
So I work in this program called TALP, which is the Tata Accelerated Leadership Program. So I particularly work with the Consulting and Services Integration Unit. So a lot of the companies that we represent, we are moving into more strategy roles, which are not only limited to tech consulting also. So it's been an interesting shift. And so that's where I fit in the consulting group. So a lot of my work is customer experience transformation, MarTech. It, of course, depends on the kind of clients you get of what you're doing. At times, it may be about, website migration. At times, it may be about their e-commerce platforms or them changing some strategies or the CXT part of it. More recently, I worked on developing, just strategic planning of processes and tools. So if it's a B2B platform to develop, or if it's a global asset hub that you're looking at within companies. So yes, so it just depends on the client. And like any consulting, like it can be marketing, it can be about distribution centers and operational efficiency. But I've been fortunate that while it is a rotational program and right now I work more with life sciences at the moment. So it kind of gives me a different level of exposure working with healthcare and life sciences. But media and entertainment are still my go-to areas. And so I basically choose companies according to the background that I like to work in. And TCS gives me that flexibility.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Shifting gears a little bit, I see you as one of the biggest career changers in our class, from coming in from a acting background and then going into business school and then in consulting firm. I really want to understand about your life before MBA, and then how was your life during MBA, and like what were you expecting. So the first question I actually have is, can you tell me a little bit about your life before MBA? Like, how did that look like?
Well, my life before the MBA was far more glamorous, to say the least. So yes, it was more creative, more glamorous. I used to work as an actor in the Indian film industry. So as most of you know, at Bollywood. So the last, like for 7 years, I worked in Bombay. So from being a lead actress in 3 mainstream Bollywood films that had like national and international releases, you can even find some of them on Amazon Prime Video. So you can see them one of these evenings during lockdown. But yeah, so I kind of worked with people, like crews which were like 300-400 people working with you to try and create, to bring that vision to life, right? Because creating a movie is from the start to the finish, from like pre-production to conceptualizing it to actually all the planning for the shooting, to shooting the film, to eventually dubbing or even marketing it. So for me, I was very fortunate to always be involved within I was always a very active actor, that I wanted to have more ownership and more I'm a bit of a team player. So for me, it's important that if I'm working on something, I'm not only limited to one part of it, even though that may be my most essential function. But I used to be working in, when it came to like brand partnerships, marketing films, the publicity of them, or even at a script level to see of how we can make the, conceptually make something better, more interesting. I always worked like a film set is the most collaborative work environment you'll find, because there are people from spot boys to lighting to like cinematographers to the talent there to the the whole directorial team or production team. Everyone is so passionate and everyone has a unique skill set and unique function, yet you need to all come together perfectly to make the film happen, right?
Of course,
So you're all independent on each other. Like very often you shoot in different countries and different cities. So while I did a lot of work in the film industry, like at the 3 films, but I also did over 20 commercials as a model. So be it Garnier for hair, or like Pond's, or LG and Panasonic, and some of the biggest brands. I had the good fortune of working with those teams, with different, again, production houses when it comes to commercials, as well as ad agencies when you're kind of, putting it all together in-house. So, so whether it has been, overseeing media planning, brand partnerships, or negotiating these strategic brand alliances throughout, like filmmaking is a lot of hard work and a lot of collaboration that goes in it. So that is what my life looked like before.
No, as you said, it probably was far more glamorous than the life of MBA. I actually, there's probably a handful of people who are in the film industry decide to get an MBA. What was that process look like? Like, why did you just like one day decide to get an MBA, or tell me about that process?
Well, it was pretty much one day that I woke up and decided. It was almost as crazy as that. But with everything in life, I think there's a huge process, and you can't kind of discount everything that's led you up to a moment, even if that was at one moment that made you change things. But there's always a process. For me, I spoke to you about, like, along with being an actor, I was always on the creative side, on the business side of the films. Box office numbers really excited me. So, that's what I really did work on, whether it was like designing and executing the social media strategies for like bigger studios, or figuring out like online engagement, whatever it may be, in on set or off set, or marketing,
Mm-hmm.
I was always somewhere there. I recognized that while I am a creative person and I love being in front of the camera and I kind of come alive from take to take, as they say, but I did enjoy the entire film industry and the business side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I did feel that I was doing myself a disservice by limiting myself to just acting.
Mm-hmm.
While I love it, at times you realize that, you know, it is a hard industry. It does have its own challenges to figure out what is the happy balance, right? Where you can still continue to work in the film industry.
Sure.
Where, you know, I was fortunate because the kind of breaks that I got, like less than like a 0.1% of the people in India who want to pursue films get the kind of opportunity that I got to be able to accomplish what I did, you know.
Sure.
Even then, and in hindsight, also is a big feat in itself, because this is something where the success rate is like minuscule.
Sure.
To actually make it happen is an accomplishment by itself. But this is when I decided to shift, was just right before the OTT platforms came. Now the story and the narrative has changed a bit for actors. So there's, of course, like a lot more work. While I did good work, it was still like there is a lot of, it's still a closed industry, which is thankfully opening up now. So there are a lot more opportunities. So at times, maybe I feel like I'm prematurely made that decision, but so be it. But I did want to come back and start working in films, but more from a business side. Gotcha. Understanding the creative and the commerce, I thought I would be a great bridge.
Yeah.
Like whether it is working on business strategies or acquisition of films, or even being able to put projects together and get them greenlit. That was something that excited me. So I think that was, and I always wanted to study. So I come from a family of professionals, you know, education has been important. And a part of me felt that need that I wanted to learn more.
Sure.
I'm surrounded by lots of like family and friends who are like highly accomplished and very intelligent people.
Yeah.
So I did have that thirst of knowledge, wanting to know more. And when I look back, yes, it was a decision that I was feeling a bit stagnant at that time, pretty much like how everyone's feeling in lockdown. And I was like, okay, what can I do? So I was like, perhaps I should study further. And, you know, of course, you have like supportive family and friends and, you know, steering you along towards a similar thing. But I just basically said, okay, let me just pick up a GRE or a GMAT book and let me study for it. If, you know, I do well,
you get in.
Then perhaps I'll apply to schools.
Yeah.
And in my first try, I did pretty well. So then there was no reason to not apply to schools. So it was almost like I took an action, the ball started rolling, and it wasn't about looking left or right. I just rolled with it.
No, that's a very, very, very good way of putting it, because I think just having that bias for action, that's what makes changes in our lives. And I really admire your courage, because not a lot of people who are in that industry living as, you know, like an actress or actor would probably not be willing to give up whatever they have and then come here to the US to, you know, start over, if you put it that way. Kind of a follow-up question to that, but back then, when you started applying for MBA schools, like what did you see yourself doing after graduating? Like, did you see yourself like working in, for example, in Hollywood, you know, filmmakers, like in business, or did you see yourself working in consulting?
Well, I definitely did not see myself working in consulting. It was a happy chance that happened the way it did. I did definitely see myself working with, you know, one of the top 5-6 studios, or like now I think entertainment and tech is the sweet spot, right? Whether it's a Netflix or Amazon Prime Video or like a Disney Plus and Hulu, like when you take the names, like the landscape is, and the potential is huge of all the changes that are happening. What was very interesting is that when I started applying to a lot of these places, also, and like, you know, in tech, right, entertainment has a later recruiting cycle than, like, say, consulting on campus and everything else. So TCS happened to me a little earlier, and I had gone to Barcelona for my exchange, where I was having a
Yeah.
really good time immersing myself in the Spanish culture, which meant a lot of I was just like extremely busy at that time, making the most of my exchange program. And TCS, like say, had happened like around November, December, the year before. So
Sure.
we do have to, like for me, when I was calibrating and I looked at all the applications that I would be putting in later for entertainment, I made a very fun observation where a lot of the job profiles that I wanted had a minimum X amount of years, like 2 to 6 years, depending on the kind of job, of consulting or investment banking experience to be able to serve in those roles. And this is where things got very interesting, because one would think that I have this experience in the film industry for 8 years, which is varied across like the entire span of film, right? What a lot of the post-MBA jobs for entertainment were looking for was new blood, like a new take. They wanted someone from the outside who was passionate about films to come in and like learn and, like be able to bring an outside perspective. So for me, in a way, I was an old blood. It was interesting that most of my experience has been in India and of course Asia. So it does bring a very different way of thinking, knowledge of audiences. And I've lived between Turkey, India, and the States. And now I guess a bit in Spain, right? So I do bring a unique perspective there. At the time, it seemed, and with TCS, they did have like a lot of these prolific companies and studios as their partners. So I thought that would be a great move for me to be able to work with those studios from a consulting perspective.
Gotcha.
Where I'm still working more at a strategy level, but building it to be able to go back to the studios one day.
Yeah.
Because I can't like that. Eventually, that's where, what stimulates me the most.
Yeah.
Films, working in films, being in entertainment, and storytelling.
Yeah. No, totally makes sense. Like coming up from a non-business background, did you have any learning curves when you were in MBA? Like, did you, struggle about like all these kind of business concepts and stuff?
So coming from a non-business background, it was only a learning curve. There was no class that I took for granted. I came there very hungry to learn more.
Yeah.
And I think I made the most of it. Like there were times that I would get notifications from school that, hey, you've taken more credits than you need to. Like when I eventually graduated, it was with a lot more credits that I needed. I always would front load my self with as many classes as I could go for, because I generally thought that this was a great time, those 2 years, to maximize my learning potential. And there were so many different industries and fields, right? So not only about the professors, but your classmates, the varied experiences they come from, or the case studies that you do. So I think everything was an amazing learning experience and monumental in making who I am right now. And it was definitely the best decision that I did take, because if I see myself like 3 years from, before or to where I've come, to all the things I've learned and how I've exponentially increased my potential, I am very proud of myself and satisfied. And now the learning is continuous, right? But I did do a lot of pre-work, because coming from a non-film background and being in a classroom with a lot of times people who are from like, banking or consulting or like operations or like different things.
Yeah.
I did do a lot of like online courses. I reached out to different kinds of professors to see the summer before I joined the business school, what I could do in that time to make sure I hit the ground running. So whether it was finance or like, the present value of like cash flows and all of like, all those fun concepts and accounting, I made sure that I was well aware of the basics.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
because of that, I think I set myself up for success, that I did not find it, I was challenged, yes, but I did not find it challenging.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's even hard for people coming from a business background. So like I can't really imagine how, challenging it was. And I think you did an awesome job, during our school. So
I think it's easy when you have fun classmates like you. And, and I worked in teams with you also before.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
been in a few analytics classes together. I
Yes.
guess
Yeah.
I think what's interesting in those formats is that you don't need to know everything yourself,
Exactly.
as long as enough people know it and you can learn from each other and produce those results. So
Oh
I
yeah, for
think
sure.
what made learning easier and more fun was working it out with your classmates.
Yeah. Makes total sense. And Anindita, can you tell me a little bit about your recruiting? Have any challenges because you are coming from a non-traditional background?
So for me, I'd like to consider myself fortunate. I did not have a lot of experiences. If anything, I genuinely believed it helped me. And that was a fear that I had earlier, right? That I'm coming from a non-traditional background, perhaps to be able to translate it may not, very often you don't find 100% match in what they're looking for and your experience, especially if it's so unique. The only thing I learned, and that's something that I tell whoever's watching this and whoever's from a non-traditional background, never undersell yourself. Your experience is very important. The more different it is, the more important and more valuable you are to a team or a company. Very often people look for XYZ, and perhaps you can give more than that. The only thing is to be able to translate your business, like your experience, in the exact business terms of the words you use, of how you did it. Because no matter what your function is in a team or the industry, there are a lot of the same skill sets you do use. Whether it's networking, whether it is negotiating, whether it's collaborating across cross-functional teams, whether it is just bringing things together. Like you can be having a job in a tech firm, you can be working in entertainment, you can be working in a restaurant business. No matter what you think of, I really believe that the same skill sets or a similar pattern are used. And it's only how you advertise yourself and sell yourself, and the words that you use are what's important. And I guess engineering is different, but if everyone had the same set of experiences or background, I don't think we'd have a lot of innovation happening in the world. You need a bit of friction, and even for brainstorming, like those are my favorite parts, where you're with your teammates and you're trying to figure out the roadmap or like what needs to happen. And at times you need those crazy ideas to get people inspired.
Yeah. I love how you said, putting in those experience in business terms, because I think that's probably one of the most important skills. It's basically storytelling. You want a story that can convince the interviewer or the person you're sitting with that you can do the job. And in a business way, that's exactly what is really important, I think. I actually have one last question. What would your advice be for those who want to change their career, like pivot their career from A to something very different?
Firstly, pivoting careers is seen as a very daunting thing. It shouldn't be. Big life changes take a lot of strength and courage, or at times being absolutely naive, right? When you don't know any better and just roll with it. For me, that the biggest accomplishment that I had was to be able to make that pivot and change. Because I did recognize that being an actor at that situation, now things are really evolving. So, my thoughts from 2 years ago have also changed on that, right? Where, there was a limited shelf life, there was limited work. You're like, hey, what's my backup career after this? It may no longer be serving true, but, when you study, there are more things you get to know and more companies you speak to. You understand what you want and don't want. So the first thing in pivoting is understanding what industry or what functions you're going to. You may go into an industry you like, but you may be doing a function you don't like, or vice versa. So talk to people in those industries or people who pursued careers there. Understand it, try and figure out how you can offline work on some similar projects, figure out whether you really like it, because pivoting does take a lot of effort.
Sure.
So firstly, be sure of what you're pivoting to, because, like, it's good to pivot, but it's not great to be a headless chicken where, you're just changing a lot of things. So make a strong pivot, do it. Your experience is very essential. Be able to translate your experience in those terms, figuring out from different job profiles or what they're looking for, and seeing if, you do have those in different terms, right? So translate it and network, and learn as much as you can, because now learning is not limited to classrooms, thankfully.
Yes.
So you do have like a lot of online courses, news items, like just like being very abreast with current news. Like there's nothing that happens in entertainment or tech that I hopefully don't know about, right? I still stay very abreast. So because knowledge is empowering, even if you come from a different industry or experience. Do not sell yourself. Know what you bring to the table, and just own it. Like, be very proud of it. And there is a certain element where I feel like culturally in America, people don't like showing vulnerabilities. So very often if you're like, hey, I don't have an experience in this, but I have this, very often it's seen negatively. That's something that I struggle with myself, because I do believe in transparency, where I'm like, hey, I may not know this, but I know Y, Z. But chances are, it just depends on the person you are and how you are. I either forget about this and just talk about this. Just talk about your strengths. But it depends on the recruiter. It depends on who you're thinking. If I was in HR, I would like people to show me their vulnerabilities, because for me, I would think that they're open to learning based on that.
Sure.
I would rather have someone on my team who doesn't pretend to know everything.
Yeah.
And wants to grow.
Yeah.
So I think that's a cultural struggle that I have very often. Because I'm sure you've had to run into a bit of that, where you think you're being honest, but that's precisely what works against you. Thank you so much for doing this series with me, for starters. And thank you for letting me share my experience.
Of course. No, thank you so much, Anindita. This really means a lot to me. I'm sure all the audience got valuable lessons from this video.
And if there's any follow-up questions, you can contact him, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there's something in particular you're dealing with, and I can help in any what way.
Awesome.
And last thing, always ask for help. Very often we feel like somebody else will give us those opportunities because we're putting those things, but just ask. Like the first thing about networking, very often in the film industry, I held back, and that's what business school said. No matter what industry you're in, whatever you want, ask for it, because no one's going to think of it. No one's going to give it on a platter, and there's no shame in asking. Like, ask, you never know, and it's always paid forward.
Yeah, love it.